أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. الله أكبر الله الحمد. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما واجعل تفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل فينا ولا منا شقيا ولا محروما. اللهم تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. So we're kicking off the second semester a little bit with uncertainty, but alhamdulillah, things started to become more clear today. Initially, we said January 5th, and then we got notified, I think, the Friday before that we couldn't book any rooms until the 19th. And then we just, alhamdulillah, they responded to us this morning about the 19th, which is today. So I'm hoping, inshallah, that we have this room for the rest of the semester, or is it just week by week?
But if you prefer this room,
I mean, it's not ideal, but if it accommodates enough people, then I mean, even the other room is probably a little bit better, just because when the attendance was larger, this room may not necessarily fit. And just the setup, I think, is more ideal on that one, but if we can, inshallah. So I guess more to come on what rooms for the next few classes, inshallah. We left off last term. The mouse. All right. We left off on the fourth cluster of Juz Amma, which we started earlier this year, and we got to Surah Takathur when we finished that surah. And without just because there's quite a bit of surah in this last cluster, without going into each of those and what the themes are, kind of the overall theme of this section is really Islamic values. And Surah Al-Asr, Surah Al-Humaz is what we're planning to cover today, inshallah ta'ala. I would say these are like exceptionally, I think they're hard surahs to reflect on, not because they're difficult. It's because they actually bring the realization that things are really serious. And I think that getting that message and reflecting on that on your own, you'll start to, be uncomfortable with yourself. And I think that's what I mean by difficulty. I think that, discomfort is important because you realize that maybe I'm not doing what I should be doing. And so Surah Al-Asr is what we're going to start off with. Surah Al-Asr talks about time. Al-Asr means time. And it really is, it's subhanAllah, it's such a short surah that I think almost every Muslim probably knows, irrespective of age and background. But it really is a surah that speaks to making the most out of our limited time. And it does urge humanity to make good use of the limited time available. And this is achieved by focusing on your purpose that you were created for. We'll talk about that, inshallah, in the surah. Surah Al-Asr is named as such. It's called either Surah Al-Asr or Wal-Asr, which is the first ayah. And it's reported by Tabarani that two men amongst the Sahaba, anytime they would meet, and before they would separate or they would part, they would both recite Surah Al-Asr before they left, and then they would say salams. So it is, we'll read it together, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, it's moving. And then we'll kind of go into the importance of time. And I actually have also a little bit of a few slides to talk about time. And I think it's worth spending some time on. So we'll start, inshallah ta'ala, with reading Surah A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaytanir Rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal 'Asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. So that's the surah. It's short, but it's very concise, but it's very important, and its meanings are rich. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts off with an oath, right? A lot of the surah that we've covered in Juz, Allah starts with an oath. And what are the two things we have to remember when Allah takes an oath? Yeah, what he takes the oath by subhanahu wa ta'ala and what comes after it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking an oath by time. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by time, it's and he's done it subhanahu wa ta'ala with his, swearing by his creation, it shows you how valuable of a commodity this is. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swearing by his creation that is of time. This is not just a lot of oaths are not just educational, or they're educational, not just essentially things to pass by. And so we need to reflect on the concept of time. But what I'll do, inshallah, is I'll cover the surah and we'll kind of go back to this concept of time. So by time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking an oath by time. Inna al-insana lafi khusr. Indeed, inna is an article of emphasis or tawkid in the Arabic language. Inna al-insana lafi khusr. Human is at loss. What is the human at loss? Is it loss for time or loss for everything? Both meanings are okay, right? Both meanings fit here. That humans, by time they're in a state of loss. Hassan al-Basri did say that the world is actually it was Hassan al-Basri or I think it's Hassan al-Basri. Correct me if I'm wrong, but human, you're a number of days. Every day that passes, part of you passes away. Okay. So indeed, every day every day you sleep and you wake up, a part of you is gone. We kind of look at it as I'm alive, then I'm dead, but it's actually a continuum, a gradual state where you're losing some of yourself every single second, and it's important to think about that. The Prophet says, "Ightanim khamsan qabla khams." Take advantage of 5 before 5, and I want to spend some time on this hadith as we talk about this state of loss that insan is in. شبابك قبل حرمك وصحتك قبل سقمك وغناك قبل فقرك وفراغك قبل شغلك وحياتك قبل موتك. So the Prophet mentions take advantage of 5 before 5. I'll just kind of highlight them and how they're related to time, because each one of those actually is related to time. So I won't, not in any particular order, but hayatak qabla mawtik. Take advantage of your life before you're dead. That's talking about time, right? Once a person dies, the first thing they ask for is what? Time, right? حتى إذا حضر أحدهم الموت قال رب ارجعون لعلي أعمل صالحا. Oh Allah, just give me one more moment. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Kalla, no more moments. So when that time comes, the person will ask for more time, but time is expired. So take advantage of your life before your death. Take your advantage of your youth before your old age. And that is also a concept of time, because the things you can accomplish at your age now are a lot more than what you can accomplish when you're my age, or certainly, somebody else who's senior. You think about just, I just kind of contemplate this as I work with, obviously, family and friends who are older, and, the amount of time it takes them just to get ready to leave the house. An hour or 2 hours. We take it for granted that we can get ready in 5 minutes. But realize that when you get older, things take a lot more time. And when they take a lot more time and you need to do them, you're actually consuming your time faster, right? You don't have as much in your tank. We assume that when we're young, we're going to have all this time. Of course, if we live, but if we do live, the time is not linear. What amount of time that the 4 hours you had in a day to yourself today is not the same as 8 hours when you're older, because those 8 hours when you're older, you can get a lot less accomplished in those hours. So take advantage of your youth before your old age. وصحتك قبل سقمك, and take advantage of your health before your sickness. We all know, we've all experienced some level of sickness. How easy is it to accomplish certain tasks or to do things? It's, you try to, even look at your notes and study when you're sick. You have to read them over several times before it sticks versus when you're healthy. So the amount of time you invest into something when you're sick is not equal to when you're healthy. And when, غناك قبل فقرك. So, when your state of, غناك is wealth, but it's not just wealth in terms of money, but it's resources, right? You have resources at your fingertips. You have friends who can support you, family, right? You may be living with your parents still. If that's gone, and there'll be a time when those resources are gone, things are going to be a lot more difficult to do, and you're going to invest more time in doing them yourself without your support. So take advantage of your state now before it's gone. وفراغك قبل شغلك, and your free time before it become busy. And Shaitan's really good at this, but always tells you, you're busy now, you have exams, you have this, just push it, when you're free. سوف أعمل. I will do it. I'm very busy now. But the reality is you're only going to get busier. You really are. The responsibilities just keep adding up as you get older, as you as you graduate and you're going to get a full-time job or go into professional school, as you get married, as you have a responsibility to your spouse and your children, as you have a responsibility to your aging parents, it just piles on. What you have now is not what you're going to have a year from now or 10 years from now. If Allah grants you life, even when you're in your older age. So take advantage of what you have now. Don't think you're busy now. You're not. I'm telling you, you're not. I promise you, you're not. I was in your shoes. I came here 10 years to Western. I thought I was busy. But I look back and I say, I wish I had that time, really. And I wish I had somebody who told me that, but I didn't necessarily. So please, take advantage of those 5 before the other 5 come into place. And you never know. It's a blink of an eye that things change. We know, people in our own community in London where they're perfectly healthy, young professionals, and one car accident changed their life, literally a millisecond. And now they can't sleep very well at night. Now they have a hard time focusing. Now just to accomplish certain things that we took for granted or they took for granted are hard. Take advantage of time before it's gone, because again, this is a commodity that you don't have infinite resources for. And the Prophet did tell us also, لا تزول قدم عبد يوم القيامة حتى يسأل عن أربع, that the feet of the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment will not move. So your foot is not going to move out of its place until you're asked about one of 4 things. The first one that the Prophet mentioned is وَعُمْرِهِ فِيمَا أَفْنَى, and their life and how they spent it. Again, this is time. What you have is time. And I will say the biggest blessing that anybody could be given. What is the biggest blessing that somebody could be given? What's your biggest blessing that you have? Islam. Islam is your biggest blessing. After Islam, what's your next biggest blessing? Sorry? I can't hear you. Yeah, so it's not health, it's time. Because you can still do certain things when you're not healthy. You can still worship Allah if la samahullah, may Allah protect you all, protect us all. If you're paralyzed, there's still time to worship Allah. You can still worship Allah without necessarily being able to move your body. But once time expires, it's done. So time is actually the biggest blessing after Islam. And so we need to ensure that we are protected. Yes.
I feel like when you have time, you start thinking there's so many things I can do right now, and then it becomes like overload, and so now you don't do anything.
Yeah, that's Shaitan's way of saying you have so many things where to start and you don't start at all.
How do you know what to invest your time in, and what to do with your time?
We'll talk about it after maybe the surah for a few moments, and then inshallah we'll have a bigger discussion. I actually we there is a time management workshop that I actually, I think we did this at MWN, were you there? We did it for the brothers. We can do it for the whole community or the sisters, but we talk about these things. So inshallah, if we don't, answer your question to your fulfillment, inshallah, maybe we can organize something. But it's really it's this concept of there's a lot of time management courses out there, but a lot of them don't incorporate the Islamic perspective, which is really important because at the end of the day, they just kind of give you tactics on how do you manage your schedule, yourself. But this is extremely important, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned. So inshallah, I'll try to maybe just address your question at the end about that. So after, in the insan, indeed, human is at a loss, continuous state of loss. You're continuously losing in your life here, and that you're losing your time and you're losing essentially everything. Except إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives an exception here, who's not at loss. And there are 4 types of people who are not at loss. Actually, it's not really 4 different types of people. It's one group of people that do 4 things. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, except those who believe. وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, and they do good deeds. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. And I'll explain the last 2 and I'll go back to the first 2 for a reason. But tawasaw, what does tawasaw mean? Yeah, it's to give and receive advice. It comes from wasiyah. Wasiyah is to advise, or to give advice. Now, a lot of people think when they read this, they think, oh, and those who believe and do righteous good deeds, and they offer advice. It's not wawasaw, it's watawasaw. Watawasaw comes from wasiyah, we said, but it's an exchange that happens. So you're giving advice and you're receiving advice. And this advice is regarding 2 essentially areas. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ. They give advice about righteousness and they receive advice about righteousness. What's worthy of standing for justice, they'll receive advice and they'll give advice. It's a 2-way street. It's not just one way. Nobody just gives advice. They have to be able to accept advice because this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us how to build a community. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ. And وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, and advising each other into what is worth being patient for and persevering. Okay, and again, tawasaw means both of them did it. Not wasa or wasaw is one way. Watawasaw is two-way. And if you think about it, there's an old man that's lived for 60 years or so, and that person's made 100 mistakes. And he sits down with a younger man who's made 50 mistakes. If they share their mistakes, what they've learned in life, the young man now has 150 holes to avoid in life. He's learned 50 on his own, but he's also learned from this man through the tawasaw process, 100. So now he can avoid 100 holes, 150 holes. And as this younger man grows up, he learns 50 more on his own. And so he's learned about 200 holes in life that you want to avoid. And so when he sits down with a younger man who's still, gone through maybe 10, that younger man can learn from 200 problems to avoid, right, and not replicate. And if you think about that, generation after generation, if every generation learned from the previous generation, you would avoid a lot of problems and a lot of holes. You would think, I need to reinvent the wheel. You don't. Because every generation should be learning from the previous one. And if there comes a time where there's a generation that is less, or it's more ignorant than the previous one, that's a problem. We talked about that. Remember when we did Surah Al-Alaq, Iqra. No generation should know less than its previous one. It should learn from the previous one and its own experiences. And so we need to take advantage of learning from other people so we don't waste time. Because if you have to go through those 200 holes and fall into them and recover, then you've wasted time. versus learning from somebody and making sure that you're protecting yourself. Otherwise, if we all make mistakes, if we don't teach people about our mistakes, then our mistakes are in vain. They're lost. Well, you fell in a hole, you might as well tell other people about it and stand in front of the hole and say, hey guys, don't come here. There's a hole here. I fell in it. It's miserable. Save yourself the time and avoid this. Versus to say, you know what, I fell in the hole. I'm going to pretend like I didn't fall. My ego is big enough. I want to protect my ego. I want to protect, I don't want to look, a certain way in front of people. And so I won't mention this, let other people fall. And then people are wasting time. And we all know problems take time to solve. And they're exhausting and they take your complete focus. And so we can't have our mistakes go in vain. We need to learn from them and teach other people. That's why watawasaw. Teach other, learn from each other's mistakes so that you don't necessarily have to repeat the whole process and waste time. And so this is the importance of the tawasaw, the exchange of advice so that people learn from each other. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this surah is saying, is indirectly saying it's okay to make mistakes as long as you learn from them. You learn from your mistakes so that other people and you can benefit from other people as well. Now, going back to the first two descriptions, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Except for those, everybody's at a loss, except for those who believe. Ultimately, and we could be, believers, but still miss out on losing in our current state. When it says, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, those who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if things are not done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they're lost. You could be Muslim, you could be practicing, but you set up, you help, establish a prayer room for the wrong reasons. Or, you help, a marginalized group of people for the wrong reasons. Or you help somebody with their homework for the wrong reason. Right? None of that counts. It's all wasted time. It's all wasted time. So you can think about it and say, you know what? I want to, I want to get something out of this for myself. I want to show off. I want to look like I know. I want to be a leader in this community. Okay, you could, but then all of the time you're spending doing that thing is waste. And on the day of judgment, you have none of that. And this is why it's important that we protect that. And it's what إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. We know that we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and everything is for Him. وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. And remember, we talked about this concept, وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Every time you see, not every time, but almost every single time, آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ are together in the Quran. Can you think of ayat that amanu is separate from wa'amilu salihat? It's difficult. There's a few, there's a couple, maybe three, but almost every single time, alladhina amanu wa'amilu salihat. You can't separate these two. Once you separate these two and you treat them differently, then a person can say, well, I believe, but they don't do good deeds. That's nifaq, right? Because that deeds is a testament of your belief, right? Or vice versa, right? You do good deeds, but you appear that you're doing them for the right reasons, but you're not. Once those two are not balanced, they're not at the same level, then it's hypocrisy. And so it's very important that salihat comes from salah or salih. Remember we talked about the concept of salih? What does salih mean? In the Arab, if you go to an Arabic country and you buy a computer and it doesn't work, what do you say? هذا غير صالح. This doesn't work. Or if it works, you say هذا صالح. This works. Salih comes from the concept of fulfilling your objective. If this computer is not doing what it's supposed to, then it's غير صالح. And so we take this concept of salihat. If a human is not fulfilling their purpose, then they're غير صالح. So it's not just doing good deeds, it's doing what you're meant, what you were created to do, what your function in life that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assigned you with is. If you do that, then you're salih. If you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, then you're غير salih. And what is our purpose? We talked about this before. What is our purpose? وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he said, I didn't create jinn or ins or humans except to worship me. And that form of worship is an umbrella term. How do you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You fulfill your purpose. And that is, as you alluded to, Sister Emma, is your إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. That you have responsibility, you're a vicegerent on this earth. You have responsibility over the earth. That's your responsibility. If you don't fulfill this responsibility, you're غير صالح. So إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. If you are doing things for His sake and you're doing them as per what you're supposed to function, your objective, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what He designed you and created you for, then you fulfill those. Then you're not losing time. Then everything is not at a loss. Right? وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. I will talk a little bit about just a kind of a few extra points before I go into a little bit more detail in terms of time. The best of creation, alayhi salatu wasalam, always asked his Sahaba for advice. He would always say, alayhi salatu wasalam, Ashiru alayya ayyuhan nas, right? Oh, people, tell me what you think. He always used to seek people's advice. Prophet either had inspiration from Allah to do something, but if he didn't, he would ask people. There's nothing wrong with asking people. Every single person in this room, whether you're experienced or not, whether you're old or you're young, everybody has something to offer. Always. Always. You may be, in your 40s, in your prime, and you've gone through, years of education and years of experience at work, and there's this young graduate that's just joined. That young graduate can offer you something that you may not have. Can't look at people, look down upon people, which by the way ties into our next surah. But you can't look at them. Everybody's got something to offer. And the point is to learn from people. So you don't have to go learn it yourself and learn the hard way or waste time. So the Prophet, he always asked people for their advice and their experience. And this is something we do usually, whether it's with our friends or family or colleague. But sometimes when we're talking to people, we're listening to critique. We're listening so we can respond. We have to get into a habit that we start listening to learn. What can we get out of this conversation? It's not always, I have to always win this conversation or this discussion or this argument. I have to seem that I'm on top. I know more, or this is the right way. When you talk to someone, when you hear somebody out, do it with the ear of trying to learn, try to understand. It's better for you so you don't repeat a problem that's already been shared with you. So we can't let our egos, we can't let our egos, our status, our self-image get in the way. We have to listen with an ear of learning, and we have to teach people about what we've gone through. Again, there's this whole, I can't share this, I'd look bad, but will you save other people from going down the wrong path? And there's examples in our community who have actually gone through a difficulty, and they spent the rest of their life sharing that difficulty and educating everybody, right? So that their mistake and their problems don't go in vain, so that at least other people benefit, and then it becomes on your balance of good deeds. So this concept of time that we need to focus in on, and not be of the losers. Now I will go through this exercise. Now I'm going to assume the average age in this room is about 20 years old. You may be 19, 18, or 21, 22, or a bit older. But if you're, let's say you're 20, and let's say you live to the average, lifespan. I think this is a bit dated. Maybe the lifespan's a bit higher now. I haven't really looked up, 2026 stats. But the average Canadian, let's say, lives about 75 years. That means you're 20. You might feel that if I live to the average age, and it might be 55 more years. Seems like a long time, right? Well, if you sleep 8 hours a day, that translates to 17 years of those 55. Okay. So what do you have left? 8 hours a day. I don't think anybody can avoid sleep. I mean, you end up sleeping 3 hours or 4 hours, but then you feel miserable the whole day, and you may not be able to accomplish a lot of the things you wanted to accomplish. So we can take 7, 8 hours. You'll save an hour if you do 7 hours, fine. But on average, people sleep 8 hours a day. So that out of that 55 years we said, then you're down to what? 38? 38. Am I doing math correct? 38. 55 minus 7, 38. If you go to school or you work full-time job, there's another 8 hours a day. Another 17 years. If you count for eating, cooking, drinking, throughout the entire day, and cleaning up off yourself, let's say it's about 2 hours a day, give or take. Includes time eating with your family, or you're invited to someone's house, right? So 2 hours a day. You may say, I'm not social. I don't, I eat, I swallow my food in a few minutes. On average, it's 2 hours a day. Oops. This is the average daily phone usage. This is not usage for work or for learning. This is just usage for entertainment or scrolling or email. The average, this is American data, but the Canadian data is not too far off. Up to 2021, it's of almost 4 hours a day. And I'll tell you about maybe 8 years ago, the average Canadian, this was again before phones, smartphones are around, but they're not as useful as they are now or as distracting. The average Canadian, I think the stat was about picks up their phone just to kind of look at it 150 times at least a day. So that's a lot of time spent on something that's distracting and useless. Again, I'm not talking about learning or work. I'm talking about just scrolling and watching. So we're not going to do 4 hours. We'll get 3 hours. Okay. That's 6.3 years. If you do that every day of your life, until you're 75. It's a long time. 6.3 years. Factor in transportation. So if you take the car or the bus to school or back or work, grooming, using the washroom an hour a day, praying and socializing, just chit chat here and there. What you end up doing out of those 55 years that you thought you had left, you really only have 4 years left. I told you it's difficult to think. This is a difficult surah to reflect upon. We don't have a lot of time. We really don't. These are just basics. These are things you have to do. We're not saying, travel, go on vacation, play video games, play sports. Exercise is not even on there. We don't have a lot of time. And this is if we live to 75. So we really need to make sure that, number one, this is all done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you're sleeping, you have the intention before you sleep that I'm sleeping so I can get rest, so that tomorrow I have a productive day for His sake. When you're eating, before you're eating, you renew your intention that I'm eating so I can get value from this meal so that it can keep me going. But of course, it's not just intending and then eating, all the junk food and all of the unhealthy food. If you're really intending to eat for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you're regulating what you're eating and how much you're eating. But we need to turn this and make it all as part of إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Because if we don't, then all of this is a waste. And all you have is 4 years to work. But again, were you created to do these? Or these are just means for you to do what you're supposed to do? They're means. You weren't created to sleep or eat or, travel. You were created to function as Khalifa. You're a vicegerent. You have a responsibility of da'wah. You have a responsibility to improve the state and the welfare of people around you in your community and the ummah, and so on and so forth. And so we need to start planning. And this, I'm going to answer your question, right? We have so much to do. And when time comes, we have free time. What do we do with it? You have to have a plan. Everything is set. Nothing is, one time comes, if it comes, then I'll figure it out. You have a list of things that I could do between my classes, between meetings. I show up to something, I'm waiting 5 minutes for somebody. I have already something prepared I can do while I'm waiting. Take advantage of those gaps between things in your day. But how do you take advantage? You have to pre-plan. I have a list of things that I can do quickly, and I'm going to do in between the day, so I don't have to waste time later to do. Okay? I have a plan of, again, we talk about planning within time management. What is your ultimate goal? What are you trying to, like, there's so many paths to Allah. What is your path? What are you trying, what's your ultimate, what do you want to present on the day of judgment? Working with orphans, building hospital, building a school, solving world hunger. What's your goal? What's your purpose? As long as you're devoting that time to it, that time. And find bits and pieces around your day to keep pushing that. That's what you'll ask. That's what you need to invest your time. So without going into too much of this, because this is a whole workshop, but I wanted to bring this perspective because Surah Al-Asr really talks about the importance of time, and sometimes this is just a reality check. People don't realize, oh, I don't have very much time. I don't. That's if you live, and I live to 75. And by the way, it's not linear either, right? Between 70 and 75, you can't accomplish what you can accomplish now. If you try to memorize a page of Quran now, it may take you 10 times the amount of time when you're 7, and you still won't memorize it. I'm telling you. So things that you can do now, take advantage of your time now. Okay. Any questions? Yes.
Would you see that that's not part of like your function? Like, say if you're a therapist or something, like you're contributing to the well-being of people, or a lawyer, or like whatever, like like is that not part of? Because I feel like we kind of see it as like, okay, this is what I'm gonna dedicate my time to. But is career not part of that?
It could be. It doesn't have to be. It should. You all. I mean, some people are gifted with that opportunity, that they're skilled at something and it can actually fulfill a bigger purpose. The minimum is, I'm working, for example, as as a father, I work a job and it's providing me halal means to provide for my family, which is a responsibility of mine. That is, of course, that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if it's a job that you can kind of, serve humanity, not just the bottom line of a company, you're blessed. Take advantage of it. You're blessed. And I would say seek those opportunities out if you can. Doesn't have to be that way, as long as what you're doing is doesn't cross the boundaries of Allah. The risk that you're generating is halal. But those are just minimums. Okay. Any other questions before we move on to the Takathur? Yes. Oh, you want to? Okay, go ahead. Okay. So let's move on, inshallah, to Surah Al-Takathur if there's no questions. All right. Takathur. I'm going backwards. Surah Al-Humazah. Surah Al-Humazah talks, which means actually different things. It's translated as the slanderer, but we'll talk about what Humazah means shortly, inshallah ta'ala. This surah talks about the red lines, which Muslims should not cross. And this red line is harming people. And even the slightest form of unnoticeable slander will be punished heavily on the Day of Judgment. Know that this is the last surah in Juz Amma in the Quran, actually, that talks about the punishment in the Day of Judgment. Nothing after it talks about punishment. But this because it talks about a punishment of the Day of Judgment, this is the climax. It describes the climax in a summarized form of that punishment on the Day of Judgment. Who does that punishment belong to? We will talk about, inshallah, when we read the surah. It's called Surah Al-Humazah, and also called Surah Wailul Likulli Humazah, as the first ayah mentions, and also known as Surah Al-Hutama, as well, which is a word found in the surah we'll talk about as well, inshallah ta'ala. So we can start reading. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ويل لكل همزة لمزة الذي جمع مالا وعدده يحسب أن ماله أخلده كلا لينبذن في الحطمة وما أدراك ما الحطمة نار الله الموقدة التي تطلع على الأفئدة إنها عليهم مؤصدة في عمد ممددة. Okay, so Surah Humaza starts off with Wail, the word Wail. We talked about the word Wail before when we talked about Wailul lil Mutaffifin, right? So there's two surahs that start with this word. But this word is mentioned, I think, about 27 times in the Quran. And 10 of them are in surahs. Anyone know? Surah Al-Mursalat. Does anyone know the ayah? Let's repeat it. ويل يومئذ للمكذبين. So wail, what does wail mean? So wail is different descriptions to the word wail. Again, the surah, just like it starts the same way as al-mutaffifin, wailul lil-mutaffifin. Both surahs talk about a personality or a type of person with a poor moral conduct or ethics. So poor ethics or moral conduct. And the one, excuse me, wail is a form of kind of cursing somebody or saying, may destruction happen to that person. It's also, some scholars say, it's a valley in the hellfire. It's a particular spot in the depths of hellfire that belongs to specific types of people. So regardless, whether it means, may destruction happen to someone, it's a call for someone to be destroyed, or it is a place in the hellfire, it's usually expressed as a form of disappointment. And actually, if you're going to look at the Qaf, when it talks about the child and their parents, and he says, "Uffi lakuma," ata'idani, and that he tells his parents basically, "Uff, are you promising me that I'm going to be resurrected?" At some point, and they say, "Waylaka amin, waylaka amin," may this, destruction will come to you. You better believe. So it's a form of showing disappointment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing, may destruction happen to this person, and of course this is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wailul likulli, for every humaza and lumaza. Now what's humaza and what's lumaza? Their meanings are interchangeable. According to some scholars, they've said that humaza means somebody who is backbiting, somebody who talks about people behind their backs. And lumaza is pointing out people's shortcomings or faults or belittling someone to their face. Okay. So backbiting or putting people down in front of their face. And by the way, some scholars said it's actually, humaza means putting people down in front of their face, and lumaza is backbiting. So interchangeable. Either definition you take, essentially it's the outcome is the same, right? This is defining a personality that harms people. And notice how it's finished. These two words end with humaza, not humaz and lumaz. It's humaza and lumaza. It has a ta, right? Also like hutama later on in the surah. When that ta is added in Arabic, it actually describes al-kuthra, right? Or al-kathra, like it's that action done a lot, right? it's the climax of that action, the pinnacle of that action. So humaza is somebody who points out people's shortcomings, puts them down, talks behind their back, a lot. Okay. So many behaviors fall in these two words, by the way. Somebody who tries to fracture someone's self-worth, for example. Or, again, we said by the way, talking behind someone's back, what does that mean? Because I hear this all the time. People will talk and they'll say something and somebody will remind them, you're talking about someone's, behind their back. They're not here. No. We're not saying anything bad about them. Backbiting has nothing to do with something bad. You're talking about them behind their back. Even if it's something that you think is good, as long as it could be something that they're not going to like you discussing behind their back, that's backbiting. Right? You can call somebody a prince and they're amazing, but they don't like that. That's backbiting. You got to be careful, right? It's not backbiting is you're saying something and it's truthful, but it's still behind someone's back. Slandering is when you're saying things that are not truthful about someone, and both are bad, right? This is described. Humaza and Lumaza is describing these people. It's also some scholars have said that humaz means that you can ridicule or insult people with words and actions, but also with just gestures. Just the fact, when somebody rolls their eyes or points and makes fun of someone or puts them down just by gesture, that qualifies. And it's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Mudaththir describes Walid bin Mughira. Remember, he was, Surah Al-Mudaththir talks about him in the description. Hammazi Masha' bin Amin, right? He's Hammaz. He's somebody who, he was sent to the Prophet to hear the Quran because he was one of the top poets, if not the top, in Mecca. And people said, go talk to Muhammad ﷺ. And he would gesture about Prophet ﷺ in inappropriate ways. And so this is describing him. This word was used to describe him. This does not make it, this makes it part of this description, is that you don't have to physically do something or say something other than gesture, and you qualify as part of it. And then you deserve, the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing. This is somebody, again, who is self-obsessed and looks to find faults in others and puts people down. So there's vanity with that person. الذي جمع مالا وعدده. So this person collects mal and counts it. وعدده, right? عدده, again, counts it, always counting, always looking at where money's coming, always looking, to obtain more and more and hoard and calculate for the future. And, imagining possessions and properties that will bring them security and well-being. They're always counting. They're always looking. And that's, where's money coming from? How do I get more? How do I get more? And it's just counting and counting. يحسب, and they think that ماله أخلد, that their wealth is going to give them immorality. And notice how Allah said, He didn't say amwal. He said mal. What's the difference between mal and amwal? What's the difference between mal and amwal? Linguistically, what does it mean? Singular and plural. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is belittling wealth. He's using the singular form. He didn't say amwal, because somebody who's rich has got amwal, right? Allah describes as mal. It's worthless, right? But they're so engrossed in it, they think that's what it's all about. And so you have this personality that's about collecting and counting, and again, obsessed with himself, and they put other people down, okay, at any opportunity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes actually people. والذين يكنزون الذهب والفضة ولا ينفقونها في سبيل الله فبشرهم بعذاب أليم. Those people who store their gold and their silver, which are descriptions of wealth, forms of wealth. It doesn't have to be just gold and silver. It could be other forms of wealth. ولا ينفقونها في سبيل الله. They don't spend it in the sake of Allah. Give them glad tidings of a severe punishment. يوم يحمى عليهم في نار جهنم فتكوى بها جباههم وجنوبهم وظهورهم. That wealth will be basically used as an iron on the Day of Judgment, and they will basically be pressed with that iron all over their body. This wealth that somebody was hoarding comes back and haunts them. So الذي جمع is collect, always collecting. And in actually another qira'ah, it's جمع. والذي جمع مالا وعدده. So it has a shadda. جمع is to say that they're continuously. When you add that shadda, you're continuously, consistently counting in that qira'ah. And also عدد comes from عدة أو أعدة, which means to prepare. And so this person is counting money, making plans for their retirement, for their future, and trying to make sure. People have this weird thing that they think about now. If they store enough now, they'll have security in the future. If I have enough now, I will be secure in the future, which is, I mean, it doesn't make sense. What you have now could disappear between now and the future by one event. That's something happens and you have a sickness and you have to travel the world and spend, thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to cure your sickness. It's all gone. Versus somebody who's lived very, very, simply all their life and they've always had something to eat every single day. With this false presumption that, if I accumulate and hoard and store, I will have security later on. Go do that. That's not to say don't do financial planning. Be wise, right? But don't say I'm in a hoard and just you're focused on building for the future and you've lost your life doing that. The first ayah talks about attitude towards others. The second one talks about somebody who's occupied with themselves and associate and a survival with savings and the future for the future. Inshallah, we'll wrap up in about 5 minutes, so we'll finish the surah. يحسب أن ماله أخلده. So Allah described here 5 criminal acts. همزة, لمزة, جمع or جمع, عدد, and يحسب. 5. Interestingly, Allah in the end of the surah talks about 5 descriptions of punishment. So, يحسب أن ماله أخلده. كلا لا ينبذن في الحطمة. So Allah says كلا. No. The matter is not what they claim. Right? What you think you're doing is actually not going to, it's not true. Kalla, one word to negate everything that this person is thinking. لَيُنْبَذَنَّ فِي الْحُطَمَةِ. And nabth means to cast something away or throw it away worthless. So Allah is describing this person that will be cast or thrown away worthless. Where? In al-hutama. Hutama, so again, the word nabth or nabada is to be cast worthless. Allah actually describes this and uses this word in another ayah. نبذ فريق من الذين أوتوا الكتاب كتاب الله وراء ظهورهم كأنهم لا يعلمون. That Allah is describing people who threw the Quran or the book, kitab Allah, behind their backs because they didn't see value in it. So somebody will be thrown in the hellfire. They thought they were of value. They thought they amassed and hoarded and had a lot of wealth. And they, society saw them as important and they belittled people, but it was actually them who were worthless. And they will be cast in that fire worthless. Bil hutama. Hutama comes from to break. Or hatam is to break. So hutama actually linguistically also describes a crop when the crop grows and becomes yellow. And you actually, it's on it becomes so brittle when it's yellow that if you step on it, it actually breaks and falls apart. And so the fire Allah is describing hellfire as al-hutama, because He asks in the next ayah, He says, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا, and what do you know about al-hutama? Right? نَارُ الْمُوقَدَةِ. It's describing the fire that will crush. Hutama means crush. It will crush the bones of the person being cast in it. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْحُطَمَةِ. If you remember the story of Sayyidina Sulaiman walking with his army, and the ant comes and sees them and describes to the other ants and says, لَا يَحْتَمَنَّكُمْ سُلَيْمَانُ وَجُنُودُهُ. Right? He's going to crush you without knowing. Same word. Right? Hutama comes from that. So it's going to crush that person. Some scholars say that hutama is actually a layer of the hellfire. And so, what is the connection between this now? Let's think about the connection and we'll wrap up the surah inshallah shortly. A person who talks like they are described in Ayah 1. They put people down, they talk behind their back, and then they've got a lot of money and they're hoarding it. What's the connection? Well, think about people who have a lot of money or power or status because of their wealth and how they think they can get away with things. So, for example, if you're a business owner and you have an employee, you put them down, belittle them because you're superior to them. You have and they don't. You're hiring them. Isn't that fit the description? What about a person who is a major donor at the masjid and something happens at the masjid and they don't like it and they force their will? And they put people down and they say, this is the wrong decision. This person doesn't know what they're talking about. This person is, inexperienced, this and this and this. And they get power and they think they have control because they're a major donor. Who's going to talk back to me? I give the most in the masjid. Nobody should have, people should respect what I have to say. There's many examples of people in that state that abuse their wealth and their status to put people down so they can get what they want. So it's not a description that's just theoretical. This actually happens all the time. And Allah says, La yumbadanna. La yumbadanna, right? So in that we said be cast away, but Allah saying la. La means He's taking an oath that indeed it will happen. They will be cast. Sister, I'm not just looking for someone. Yes.
I mean, the intention matter, like if you're upset with someone, but you want to talk it out with someone else before you, like when you're problem solving, like sometimes you have to like talk about the situation or talk about what that person said. So is that like any form?
So there's nothing wrong if somebody's harmed you and you're trying to look for solutions, only if you're looking for solutions and not just to vent and put that person down. Because that's what ends up happening is people say, I am justified, they did this to me, and they start talking about them and how evil they are and how evil their parents are and their siblings and things that have nothing to do with the problem are brought up. You got to be careful. If you're really trying to solve the problem, get advice, then just speak about the problem, right? And this is where Shaitan kind of starts to drag people, right? And it just becomes like an open buffet that kind of attacks someone. So we talked about people who cast. These people are cast worthless in the hellfire. And Allah says, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْحُطَمَةُ. What is the hutama? What is that crush? That crush is the hellfire. Allah says, نَارُ اللَّهِ الْمُوقَدَةِ. And look at the wording. It's not just nar. It's narullah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala associated that nar to Himself. When Allah associates something to Himself, it's a big deal. Just like Ad, right? Or Thamud rather. Thamud. What were they offered? Naqatullahi wa suqiyah. Don't harm the she camel. Naqatullah. It's Allah's she camel. Don't harm it. So when they harm it, they were all destroyed. Right? Because it's naqatullah. This is narullah. This is not something it's just hell. This is Allah's fire. Right? And this is to make it exceptional. Like this is it's scary. It's scary. This narullahi al-muqada. Muqada comes means it's lit. Lit by who? By Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Allah is emphasizing the lighting of the fire and He's associating it Himself. Right? And so that fire will never be extinguished unless Allah orders it. It will never be extinguished. التي تطلع على تطلع. And this is also another scary word. Why is it scary? Because of how it's the form of the word. So طلع is to rise. Somebody طلع, طلع البدر علينا, right? To rise or to come up. But تطلع is a gradual ascension. You keep mounting over and over and over. This hellfire, this fire that Allah described that He's associated to Himself, subhanahu wa ta'ala, narullah, tattali'u ala al-af'idah. It continuously, gradually climbs the person until they're af'idah. What is af'idah? Well, af'idah is the heart, but it's not the organ, the heart, because that is qalb. Af'idah is a center in your brain of understanding, where you understand and you process information. And so the fire is targeted towards that center in your brain. Why? Because that's the center of the brain that people put down. When people insult other people, when they harm them, when they talk behind their back or slander them, they attack. You're putting people down. This is the center that you impact. And so the repercussion is that a punishment comes that's equivalent, that attacks that center for that person. Allah's just. You attack people's self-worth, the center where that they hold up high, that is responsible for that, and that fire targets that specific location for the punishment. So the crimes of humaza and lumaza and greed that stem from that spot in the brain, that's where the fire is focused on and consumes. إنها عليهم مؤصدة. Indeed, it is muqsada. It means it's a covering. Just kind of like the last ayah of al-Balad, it uses the word muqsada. Allah, the hellfire will be closed upon them without leaving any opening. The only opening that people will have out was that opening where they were cast in the hellfire, but that will be then shut. Now it's different than having a lid. It's innaha alayhim muqsada. It's closed down. And why is that interesting? Because the psychological punishment of you see there's no door in a room versus there's a door but it's locked. You can't get out. It's a different feeling. And it adds to that agony that there's a door, it's locked, I can't get through that door. Versus there's absolutely no hope. There's hope, but there's no hope. You know what I mean? There's hope, but you can't get to it. And so the description, every word Allah Ta'ala uses in the Quran it is incredible to reflect upon. إِنَّهَا عَلَيْهِمْ مُؤْصَدَةٌ فِي عَمَدٍ مُمَدَّدَةٍ. Amad Mumaddad can have several meanings. One is that the gates of hell will be closed, and then tall columns will be erected upon these people. The other meaning is of fi amad mumaddada is that the culprits of in the hellfire will be tied to these tall columns. They won't be able to escape. They're tied to it physically. And according to Ibn Abbas, also another description is that the flames of the fire would be that tall, like big long pillars. So fi amadin mumaddada. So amad is columns, mumaddada is stretched to an extreme, so that people in the fire are experiencing the scorching hot fire. And so this is the climatic. This is the end of any discussion about punishment. It's reached the climax, and this is the way. Allah gave us a warning. Don't be like الذي جمع مالا وعدده يحسب أن ماله. Don't put people down. Don't insult people. They harm you. Be careful what you say about them. It's best to even avoid. Unless you really want to solve things. I would say if somebody continuously harms you, you should perhaps part. And it's safer for better for you, better for them. But if you try to solve a problem, also be careful of how you solve it. You can vent to somebody, but it has to be something that is intended to reach to a conclusion and a discussion that is really valuable versus just let me vent what's on my mind, listen to me, and I feel better afterwards. If you want to vent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, really. Like turn to Allah and make dua and cry your heart out. Really, that's who's going to save you at the end of the day. So I hope that was beneficial. Any questions before? I know I ran a little bit of extra time. So any questions or comments?
I'm confused.
Yeah, afida is so it's described as heart, but it's not the physical heart. The physical heart is qalb. The heart, which is the center of processing, which is actually like the center in sam'a wal basar wal fu'ad, right? Sam' is your sight, but sam'a is hearing, basar is your eyes or seeing, and fu'ad is your understanding. So it's the center in your head that is devoted to understanding. So when you put people down, that's the center that you're targeting when you belittle people, and so the punishment is reciprocated to that person. But afida is different than qalb. Qalb is actually the physical heart. Fuad is your center of understanding. Does that make sense? Any other questions? Yes.
Just for, like, you know how, like, a sad is like for the day of judgment? It's like, I'm just wondering, have there been any kind of translations or like interpretations of it as like referring to not just time, but like the end of time or like the day of judgment?
It's really time, because the day of judgment has different words used to explain it, but it is essentially what you have between you and the day of judgment. And I'll just kind of go back to Fuad. Also, Fuad, not just the center of understanding, but your consciousness, where your feelings and your desires stem from. So when someone hurts your feelings, that's the center that's harmed. And so again, reciprocation of that on the day of judgment. If people harmed people's feelings, then that's their center will be harmed by the hellfire or the other. Yes.
How do you shut down like backbiting in a way that doesn't like put down or like embarrass the person that is, like, you know, if you're in a gathering and someone misspoke, or like, do you just change the topic, or do you have to?
Yeah, I look at it three ways, three things you can do. I had a great uncle, Allah yarhamuh, who would just show up to a gathering with his wife, and literally after 5 seconds of sitting down, he would hear somebody talking about someone who's not there. He would tell his wife, "Let's go, we're leaving." And then people say, "No, where are you going? Where are you going?" I can't sit where people are talking about people behind their back. Okay, we won't talk. And then 5 minutes later, somebody talks. He actually physically got up and left. So there's that approach. That's approach one is you advise them. You say, "This person's not here. Let's not talk about them." If that doesn't work, then you leave. The third is you try to change the topic. And Allah describes people who that kind of dismiss or belittle Islam or the Deen, or the signs of Allah. Ayat سمعت آيات الله يستهزأ بها ويكفر بها ويستهزأ بها فلا تقعد معهم حتى يخوضوا في حديث غيره. So if you hear people dismissing or putting down Allah's signs or words, don't sit with them until they change the topic. إنكم إذا مثلهم, Allah says. If you stay with them and they continue, you're like them. Okay? So sitting there and listening to backbiting and not doing anything about it, I would fear that I would be of those people, because I'm accepting it. I'm not saying anything against it or leaving it. So those are the three approaches. If you have a strong personality, you say, "We're not doing this," right? And sometimes it's you're close enough with friends or family that you could do that. If it's somebody that doesn't know you very well, you perhaps say, maybe you try to change the topic, naturally. But if they're persistently going back to it, just maybe advise them or just leave. Any other questions? Yes.
Mentioned like if you're in like a hole, you should tell people like how to avoid the hole. But like if it's like you did something sinful, like
don't talk about your sins.
Yeah.
Don't talk about your sins, but you could talk about the pathway to. I mean, you don't have to go physically and say, "I did this. This happened to me," right?
Yeah.
But you can go and say, this path will likely lead you to this, and you can avoid it by doing this, right? So you're not going to announce your sins to people. You shouldn't ever. But you're still taking that experience and sharing it as a learning. Not, again, there's different ways of sharing things, right? But you don't have to explicitly say, I've tried this and tried that, and I fell into this trap. But again, teaching people about, again, young people who have not necessarily experienced certain things, like things that are sinful or haram, there may be desire for them to experience it. Say, you could just, anybody can just say, it's not worth it. Trust me, it's not worth it. You'll dig yourself into a hole and you may not even get out of it. And you can talk in the third person or say, this is, time and time again, we've seen many people, again, you're not talking about yourself directly, but you're sharing that experience with other people. Okay. Any other questions before we close? Okay, I do apologize for running a little bit out of over time. So next week, Maghrib is probably going to be the same time as 5:30. So we'll pray and we'll come back, inshallah, right away. Yeah, and with that, inshallah, subhanakallah, right. So